And let me just do a little bit of a PSA because there will be a debate aired tonight at 7 p.m. So right after this session and right after we hear from our black governor, we are going to go to turn on the TV. Because Angela Alsobrooks, you are currently the Prince George's County Executive. Do I have any sisters from Prince George's County in the house? Now, let me just start with you because you are taking on leadership in a different way. If you don't mind, as you grab your mic, talking to us about why you said yes to this assignment of running for office, and talk to the sisters about what this journey has been like for you. There it is.
There we are. Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, first of all, to President Arline Bradley, can we give it up for your president? How amazing, how amazing. And then, you know, I think the way you prefaced it is right.
Yeah.
To God be the glory. And the other thing is when you talk about me running for office, I'd like to say it's all of us in this room. The reality is I have recognized, and I know that many of you all do as well, that we don't get here alone. When you talk about all of our ancestors who paved the way for us to be here. Dorothy Height, you're right, she not only would have been proud, she's here with us.
Amen.
By virtue of the work that she has done. And I also have to say to all of the women in this room, you don't become the Democratic nominee for U.S. Senate in the state of Maryland without the people in this room. That's the reality. So for anyone who wants to understand how I came to any of these elective offices, the truth is that I have been able to rely on my sisters in every single instance. And I want to say thank you so much to all of you. Now, how did I get here? I'd have to say that if I'm fair about it, and this is the only way to do it, this has been in many ways a divine assignment. And I say that because I never woke up and said, you know what, I'm going to run for U.S. Senate. I never said I was running for any of these positions. It's just that in every moment, there was a need for it. In this moment, as we look out in this world, and we recognize all of the challenges that confront us, the reproductive freedoms that are on the ballot, and we think also about economic opportunity and what that really means for so many of our communities. When we think about our freedoms, in so many ways, I keep reflecting on the fact that we are now here 61 years after the March on Washington. And you know what we were requesting and petitioning our government for at that time? Jobs and freedom. And if we're honest about it, our requests haven't come all that, they're not all that different today.
Come on.
And we look out and how could we not step up when I realized that last year, at the time that I declared myself a candidate in the United States Senate, there were 0 black women in the Senate of the United States. Out of 2,006 United States senators that we have elected in our country, we have found fit on 2 occasions to elect black women to the Senate of the United States. I happen to believe that unless and until every single one of us of every race, gender, and background are represented in the Senate, our country cannot reach its potential.
That's right.
The policies would be incomplete. And so electing women and electing black women is not just good for black women, it's good for America.
That's right.
We're needed in the Senate. Our voice is needed. Our lived experiences are needed. And I determined that no matter how hard it was to get there, somebody reminded me a couple of days ago, I have been in this race for 520 days. And let me tell you, I feel like I have worked all 520 of them, no kidding. And you know what? It's worth every day of it. If we can look up and see ourselves and see our lives reflected in the policies that will be made.
Now, let's give her a hand. I want to offer this because when we shared with our convention that you both were coming, the reception that you got was genuine. And I preface the nonpartisan conversation because what I want NCNW to understand is we may not endorse candidates, but we do approve of black women being politically astute. We do engage in understanding the importance of what it means to not only get out the vote, but to have black political power. And you two represent what I think, and I know I got some collegiates in the room. We got some young sisters in the room. We got some collegiates waving their hand here. We've got some seasoned folks who have been around. This idea of representation is everything. Now I've got to turn to my sister. who has become an alliteration queen. She's a preacher now, with all her B's. Did I say that? I want to ask you a very specific question, because you, Jasmine, I want to say this to you. You represent another face of Black women's politics. You, first of all, they can't handle your Black beauty. I mean, really. But talk to us about the state of Black women in a federal office. Angela currently serves at the county level. This is the importance of you all understanding this. We did these panels because Black women are on all levels of government. We had our speaker for the state of Pennsylvania. We have a county executive who's now activating her plans for a future in federal politics, but you are sitting in the seat of federal politics. Talk about the state of Black women in federal politics in 2024. Come on, Jesus. Come on.
All right. Let us say a prayer.
Amen.
First of all, it is so great to be with all of you. Thank you so much to my dear soror and friend, as well as I can't sit here in the midst of all this greatness, and while Angela sits here and she is so very kind and so very humble, I literally need to brag on her for like 2 seconds, and then I'll get to your question. Listen, if y'all know anything about the Bible, I'm not gonna preach to you, but there's this little thing about David and Goliath.
What?
And baby, when I tell you that she had to face a mountain of approximately over $40 million? $65 million in her primary, and she overcame it. Now, I mean, those sound like y'all all millionaires, but do y'all know how much money 65 million is? Like, that is a lot to overcome. So I am believing, but I'm also trusting that she will finish the job, because if she could get over it, baby, that little man she dealing with now, she gonna handle him. So, but that don't mean, but she working, because faith without what?
Work.
It's dead, okay? All right now, so I just had to do that because I think people take it for granted how much we have to come up against. And so as I start this off, and I know that you just heard from the speaker, and I could hear her in the back as she talks about the money, but I really wanted to put some perspective on it, especially since we have a warrior. But the reality is that Black women have always been expected to do more with less. And while we can stretch a dollar, it doesn't mean that we should have to. And so historically, we have always been the most underfunded, period. The only person who's really broken that record is the person that happens to be running for the highest office in the land. She is the only Black woman that has ever broken a fundraising record. I mean, she is the record at this point. But nevertheless, Angela also talked about the fact that honestly, in the history of this country, we've not really seen fit to put too many Black women into the space of the Senate. So you just imagine, and listen, they don't serve together. We've had 2. Usually we don't have more than 1 at a time, okay? So we've had 2 Black women ever elected to the Senate. We have 1 who's currently serving, as she was just appointed, and hopefully and thankfully, when we get to next year, for the first time in the history of the United States, we will have more than 1 Black woman that will be serving in the U.S. Senate at the same time. But you imagine being the only one walking in. That tells you everything that you need to know. Now, obviously, we started off talking about the alliteration. For those of you that don't know the story, we can have story time. But I'm gonna give y'all the Cliff Notes version. I have a colleague of mine that doesn't sport the same colors that I do. And so she has the audacity to try to talk about my eyelashes because she felt like she could do that because she feels very entitled and privileged. But the reality is that we serve on the same level. She is no higher than me. But for whatever reason, when I walk into some of these rooms, just because I happen to be Black and or a woman, there are those that believe that somehow I'm subservient to them. Not trying to recognize or acknowledge that my constituents went out and decided to send me to be their voice to DC, just like their constituents decided to send me. And so in the face of somebody trying to come at me sideways, she learned what it is to challenge a black woman. I am happy to report that she ain't tried me again. As well as no one else in the Congress. In fact, once I stood up for myself and people realized that I wasn't the one to be played with, because not only did I respond, and I responded within the rules to where I couldn't get in trouble, because I know that I can't break rules, because when I break rules, then they'll try to enforce it on me, kind of like the guy that's got 34 felony convictions and somehow is still running for president. I understand that the same rules don't apply to everybody, so I'm just not gonna try to push the limit of the rules. I'm gonna try to play within the rules. But I will tell you that there were other Republicans that sent me text messages, came up to me, and they had nothing but words of encouragement to say to me.
Absolutely.
Sometimes it is worthwhile to smack a bully down and let them know that this ain't what you want. And even the bully learns their lesson, but even those that are watching learn theirs. And so while I can't say that the level of respect that is necessary within the halls of Congress is there for all of us, I can say that they have gone back to doing their backdoor meetings when it at least comes to dealing with me.
Okay, there we go. I'm sorry, I keep messing up this microphone. I think it is so important for me to say this about the Congresswoman, how rare and how beautiful it is and how necessary it is to recognize that it is not just standing up for yourself, but one of the things she did that was so beautiful is she actually stood up for me. In that primary race, where there were some people, let's be real, who scurried and who decided not to side with me, who decided that there was some financial benefit. Because the person who was in my race had $65 million and he was spreading it liberally. And there were people who decided, you know what, maybe I should get on his side so I can get broken off a little something. But it was Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett who came, I didn't even know her, just showed up one evening to a fundraiser that I had. Didn't need to be called, didn't need to be invited. I looked up and you know, you feel her presence when she walks in the room because she's just that kind of woman, she's a bad lady. And I'm literally gonna tell you, I looked up and here she comes walking in the room. She was there, as they say, standing on business, and she meant it. Came to the fundraiser, has shown up for me over and over again. And so when we think about how we win going forward, that's the master plan. Is when we show up for each other, there's no way we can do it. I promise you, no way we can do it. So I want to say to her very publicly, thank you so much. She hasn't had to do it, and because of her, it's not just that the bully won't mess with her, but what she doesn't recognize is the bully will take a moment to survey when he sees another one of us walking in. The bully now says, oh crap. You know, we saw what happened the last time. Maybe we should walk a little more gingerly because the respect is there. So thank you for not only standing up for you, but you have stood up for all of us, whether we know it or not. You have stood up for all of us.
I think you're getting a master class of black womanhood. This is what it means to be a black woman in position, that when you walk into a room, you represent all of us. And you know what I thought was interesting when you talked about that's not what you want. First of all, that resonated with every black woman in the world. That's not what you want. That was almost a moment of epiphany for all of us. Because everybody else was like, girl, did you see Jasmine? Girl, Jasmine gave that girl something. Smoke, some smoke. And I think what's important, and I think for the younger sisters too, what you talked about, which I thought was relevant to this, I'm gonna come back to that. You talked about playing inside the rules. That's called being strategic.
That's it.
See, there's something about strategy that we must start thinking about. And that's why NCNW, I laughed at Jasmine. I said, I'm so glad you came. She said that I have a choice. And I laughed at her. You did have a choice. I told her kind of, but listen. This is about relationships. She came because of relationship and understanding the value of an NCNW. My sisters, this is what we bring to the table. We bring power, we bring perspective, and these women are also affiliate members of our organization. That's what I want you to hear. This is your NCNW right here on the stage. Now, I want to turn to you because I think there's one thing that's really important to talk about. You are a mom too. You have a mom of a college student. Y'all pray for this. Talk about this reality of balancing life. I'm gonna ask you the same question too, Jazz, because Black women need to hear about what it means to run for office, but have a real life. See, we're out here talking about get out the vote. We're out here telling you we want Black women to be in position. You hear us talk about this often. The presence of Black women in all levels of government is important to the advancement of our community. What does that look like for you?
Yeah. So I have a daughter who is like every other mother in this room. She's 19, and I think she's the best to have ever done it. She's a sophomore student at Spelman College, and she's doing her thing. Spelman, I knew I'd get at least one. You know, what occurs to me is we can never be for the public what we are not for our own families. And so if I am advocating, if I'm fighting, if I'm showing up for everyone else's child, it occurred to me very early on that the first one I needed to show up was my own.
Come on.
Now, being in office is hard. When I initially ran for office, my daughter was 4 years old. And I decided that the community she was growing up in, I felt was less safe than the one I had grown up in. And I was literally having a conversation with a childhood friend who I'd known since I was 10. And I went on to say, you know, when I grew up, I could play out front. My mom didn't have to watch me. I feel like things are different. He cut me off and said, unless you plan to change it, I don't think we should ever have this conversation again. Wow. And then he went on to challenge me, and he literally said these words. He owns a martial arts school. And he said, you know what? You may get in there and get knocked out, but that's no excuse for you not to try. Single mother that I was, I thought, I don't know, how does this work? But I went out there anyway. I decided to run for office. I gave it everything I had. I took Alex along with me, and every step of the way, I made sure that she understood that she was the priority. Yeah. And what that looks like, I'm sure it looks like for people all in this room, with mothers, with daughters and nieces and granddaughters. Lord knows it meant I showed up on many occasions at the school, and I was there on 2 wheels trying to get there. The other mothers may have baked whatever was in their container, and I may have just bought mine 15 minutes before I got to the class party. But I can tell you one thing, is I was there. And the other thing, so I just made sure that in every juncture, she saw me modeling at home and in private the same thing I talked about in public. That meant if I said it's important to listen to your constituents, to try to hear with the heart what they care about, I've had to do that with my own daughter, and it has shown up in many occasions, and I'm sure it has for all of you. And I'll just say this, the time that I have had with my daughter has not only helped me to be a better mother, it has helped me to be a better public servant. During COVID-19, like many of you, I was home with my daughter, and I saw up front and close what anxiety and depression look like in teenage children. Wow. So when I'm out here today advocating for the mental health and well-being of our children, let me tell you, I know what I'm talking about.
That's right.
When I talk about the cost of child care, and I understand what people suffer, let me tell you, I know what I am talking about. When I talk about showing up for my aging parents, my dad is my mom's caregiver now. I know what I'm talking about and who I'm fighting for, and this is why it's important for us to be in office.
That's right.
It is hard to represent people you don't know or understand, and the lived experience is living like the people you represent, suffering what they suffer, being concerned at night with what they're concerned with, is what makes you effective in office, and it is critical that we must be there. Our solutions are different. I'll say this last thing. You all saw yesterday or the day before, Vice President Harris talk about her idea now that we should allow Medicare to be used to pay for in-home care. This is revolutionary. But you know what? You only come up with that solution if you've had to deal with, she cared for her mother who was sick with cancer.
That's
And
right.
for those of us who are right now with aging parents and caring for other loved ones, we know exactly what this looks like. But you only come up with this. Those who are closest to the pain are also closest to the solutions. It's important that we are here.
And I love that. And I'm so glad you talk about it. Jasmine, talk about your work-life balance because, girl, how many frequent flyer miles do we have?
It's over 1 million.
My gosh, talk about what that means. What's the reality of being a public servant? Someone who's on TV I'm like, where's she on tomorrow? What is that like?
Bell sheet.
Yes. What's that like for you?
Listen, it has been, I'm not balanced. I ain't gonna lie. I'm just not. I'm not. I am completely out of balance. I thank God for so many amazing women in my life, though, that are consistently sending me those text messages like, take care of yourself, take care of yourself, take care of yourself. I am childless, but I'm not a cat lady.
Hello.
And so, you know, there was a point in time in which, and I think we've all been there, especially as women, where you projected exactly what age you were going to be married by, exactly how many kids you're going to have by that time, and exactly how tall and fine he was going to be. I was that girl too, just want y'all to know. And none of it happened. Clearly God and I weren't on the same page. And so for me, I used to really question and wonder why not me? Especially as I would look around and see so many of my friends getting married. And then I finally got here to this place that I never thought I would be.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, okay, this is why. Because I don't know, number one, that I would be here if I personally had a husband and or kids. And I think that what God has done is tried to make sure that he could elevate me in only a way in which he could for this moment. And so while Governor Walz always says we'll sleep when we're dead, I'm not gonna go that far, but I am gonna say that after November 6th, I will go to sleep. But until then, almost every single day, I'm talking to any and everybody that will listen because I am truly fearful.
Wow.
And so I thank God for giving me the strength to continue to push through. I know I will crash out when this election is over, but I believe in my sisters such as Angela Alsobrooks that is sitting here with me. I know that she's the partner that Vice President Harris needs once she becomes President Harris. I understand one of the things that I talk about all the time is that y'all have seen these people act crazy on YouTube clips and TikTok clips, and even some of them just send out the crazy tweets. But just imagine what you don't see.
Right.
Imagine what they put into the legislation because they know no one is reading it. Imagine the things that they say behind closed doors. And imagine this. If they have the audacity to disrespect me as their colleague, what do they think of the rest of y'all? So for me, I know that this is life or death. And I don't have the luxury of resting at this moment. I just don't. In my state of Texas, in January, the state legislature wants to institute the death penalty for abortion. I can't sleep. Like, these are the worries that I have that keep me up and make me go every single day. And so I'm gonna look for some balance after this. It's probably gonna be a few trips that I have to take to a few countries, because I got miles. But I wanna tell you that while I'm not encouraging you to not sleep like I am, I'm encouraging you to look at somebody that you love and recognize that if we don't get this right, it may be their life that is on the line. Whether we're talking about taking care of elderly folk or whether we're talking about our youth. Because when I look at Project 2025, as I tell people all the time, there is something from the cradle to the grave for you to hate in that particular document. They don't want you to have things such as Head Start And while I don't have children, I understand the pain of my constituents
Absolutely.
that rely upon things such as Head Start. And so when we start talking about the economics of things, you've got to look at what they are trying to do to us specifically in the Black community when they are taking opportunities away from us and trying to make it more difficult for us to survive. That is less time that we have building the wealth that honestly we are entitled to, because the last time I checked, we built this country.
You know, I want to dig into the issues that are important to both of you. You started referencing Project 2025, and I want to just shout out our A&P team, our advocacy team, who actually started pulling together some content for us to understand. This is why when we talk about policy, it is crucial for the Black community to be aware of policy, aware of legislation that's passing on the federal, state, and local level. We cannot let politics pass us by. So talk to us about the issues that you deem important for our body. What should NCNW be looking out for? What should be some of the priority areas? I'll just give you some context. We have a core four, so healthcare, education, economics, and of course social justice, but talk to us about what you think or deem as priority. I'll start with you, Jess.
Oh Lord, Project 2025 is like 1,000 pages, y'all. But I will say, obviously reproductive access, and I say obviously, but clearly I brought it up. And Project 2025 seeks to not only bring about a full abortion ban, but they want to go so far as to say that we can't even have contraception. That is how far they want to go. I mean, it is mind-blowing. But when I think about the future of this country, because I tell young children all the time, or Gen Zers, I tell them all the time that half my life has passed me by. What I'm doing is I'm fighting for a better world for you. So when I think about things such as gun violence, and the fact that literally they don't want to do anything on gun violence. I mean, it is a miracle that we got our first gun bill passed in almost 30 years, and while it did some things, obviously we still have a terrible situation happening in this country, but there's a lack of focus on it. When we talk about the environment, you know, whose community is always the community that's being polluted?
Come on.
It's ours. This administration has invested a historic amount of money into things such as environmental injustice, something that my other colleagues don't even want to acknowledge, to the extent that they're so mad about all the dollars that were set aside for environmental injustice that they are trying to pull those dollars back right now. We are having fights in the House over that. But let me tell you, I have dropped off $1 million checks into my community so that we can assess the soil and the air and the water. But these people literally want to delete the EPA, and they want to get rid of the word climate change in any federal document. They want to get rid of the Department of Education. When it comes down to the DOJ, instead of it being an independent body, they want the executor, which would be the orange one, to be able to say, this is who you prosecute, this is who you don't.
Wow.
He's already made it clear that being an insurrectionist is okay for him. That's okay for him. But he's also the same guy that's pushing this agenda that says, and this is the civil rights side of me, that says, you know what, I'm tired of those progressive prosecutors that thought that your lives matter and had the audacity to prosecute law enforcement officers. So while we over here fighting for qualified immunity to make sure that we can access capital when they kill one of us, he's saying, you know what, I don't even want them to go to jail.
Wow.
That's a problem. So he wants to make sure that they have criminal immunity. I mean, the list of problems as it relates to Project 2025 is never ending, but you mentioned healthcare.
Yeah.
And when we talk about healthcare, listen, the Affordable Care Act, it ain't perfect because ain't nothing we got in this country perfect. Ain't nothing on this earth perfect. But the reality is that it's better than what we have. And right now, they want to repeal the Affordable Care Act. And did y'all watch the debate, the presidential one? Y'all heard about his plan that he's been working on for 9 years? Concepts, y'all. All he cares about is repealing it, and if you have a pre-existing condition, or if a loved one has a pre-existing condition, then we're talking about being in a situation in which you literally either won't have health care because you just can't afford it, or because they decide that they're just not going to give it to you.
Yeah.
Either way, it is a problem versus having someone who had to take care of her mother in her older age, who decided to push for making sure that if for some reason you have medical debt, that medical debt could be deleted, that it would not continue to hold you down. This is the difference in somebody who was born and given $400 million at the moment he was born versus somebody who was the child of 2 immigrants and worked and earned every single position that she's ever occupied.
I love this context on the policy, and I want to address something before I turn it over, before we close. NCNW made a stance collectively about bodily autonomy. And I want to make a statement about what this means, because we are not a monolith, right? Our organization is not Democratic, Independent, or Republican. Our organization is nonpartisan, and we span on many, many ways, specifically around faith. I mean, you all know I'm a Baptist preacher, and I do believe personally that life begins at conception. That's my personal conviction. But I've learned as this organization really wrestled with that process, where we came to an agreement with all the perspectives on the table was that constitutional freedom we all believe in. Constitutional freedom and government overreach is a space that we had an opportunity to lean in on. So I want you to understand that as you're hearing policy issues, understand that we may not always agree on them. We may not all have the same perspective on them. But as Black women, we understand the importance of our freedoms, of our liberties, of our abilities to make choices and to do the things that we decide we want to do. And I believe that that's really important to share. I want you to give us your policies, and then we're just gonna close with your 30-second affirmation to the sisters. All right?
Well, I'd say in terms of policy, as I mentioned before, you know, the things we petition the government for haven't changed that much. It's still jobs and freedom. And economic opportunity, from my perspective, is the #1 issue that I have heard across the state. And I've heard with most conversations, when I'm talking to college students, I say, tell me what you are concerned about. And many of them have said, we don't believe we'll even be able to live as well as our parents. Wow. That we don't know that we'll be able to afford the basic necessities of life. That unlike my parents, you know, I'm the daughter of a receptionist and a car salesman who married at 22 and 23 years old, but still could afford to buy a modest home 5 years into their marriage. That is no longer assumed that that will be the case.
Right.
So economic opportunity is important. And when we talk about the importance of these elections, let me just highlight in my own election. One point, since we're here in Baltimore, I think it's important for me to highlight just one example that burned me up and made me so angry. Many of you probably know, especially those of us from Maryland, that when President Obama was in office, he set aside $900 million for a project called the Red Line here in Baltimore. It was a huge transportation project that was extremely important, not just to the city of Baltimore, which, let's remember, is the largest city in the state. So we know the health of the whole state depends on this largest city. But $900 million had been set aside by the federal government for that project, and another $736 million was set aside from the state for this project that would have allowed us to draw businesses to Baltimore and economic opportunity, and would have allowed the people of Baltimore to be able to access those opportunities. Well, in his arrogance and indifference, the former governor, who was my opponent, 6 months after he came into office, sent the $900 million back to the federal government, canceled that project, and said, you know, and he had no qualms about it. In this race, he's saying he would do the same thing, and then redistributed the other $736 million that had been set aside to outward parts of the state where he owned real estate. Now, when we talk about economic opportunity, the reason we have to have people in office who understand and care about and share the concerns of the people they represent is that economic opportunity is one that may never come again, that is so difficult to bring about. But how dare you? Who does that? Send as a representative of the state, you send money back to the federal government and say redistribute it around the country? But this is the kind of thing that we're confronting, and now many of these other decisions are in somebody's hands. When we think about student loan debt, something that Vice President Harris and President Biden did a tremendous job on honoring the promise they made to help with student loan debt. And can you imagine those who spoke up and said that they resented the debt relief that was given to students who are contributing across our country, by the way. These are teachers and nurses and others who are contributing. They resented that, but never resent the big corporations, the ones who are making record profits, who have caused our groceries to be 25% higher than they were before COVID. They're raking in huge profits, haven't brought down the cost of the groceries, but we resent giving students who are contributing in public service to our country any relief, but want to continue to favor these big companies. These are the kinds of policies that we have to look out for to make sure that the people who represent us really do represent our interests, who understand what it means to empower the middle class, because what we recognize in this country is the ones who are suffering the most are middle class families, who we need to favor, to have tax policies that favor tax cuts for them. Many of these big corporations, I promise you, pay fewer taxes than the people in this room. And so these are the kind of things, when I talk about economic opportunity, is bringing infrastructure and investment across our states and country to make sure we're able to create jobs and making sure that the policies of our country are fair. And the last point I'll raise on the policy issue is how unconscionable is it that as a country we recognize that the #1 way that children die in the United States of America is by gun violence. Yeah. Not by car accident, not by illness, and we have legislators who don't have the good sense or the conscience to pass basic laws, sensible gun legislation that would allow our children to be safe. But banning ghost guns, for example, assault weapons, these are the kind of things that are going to be really important. And then I'll be obedient and finish the line. Let me just say to the women in this room, first of all, the fact of your presence today just says so much. You don't know how empowering it felt to walk up these stairs and to look out into this audience. Yes. I am so honored to be among you. I want to thank you so very much for all the support that you've given. I am so proud of everything that you do. I'm proud of what you represent. You are the conscience of our country and of our communities, and we just owe you such a huge debt. I also want to say to the president, Arline Bradley, Siobhan is incredible. Congressman Jasmine Crockett is one of the baddest women to walk the streets of America right now. Recognize what we're looking at. But you know what? I want you all to be encouraged. And in this election in particular, I want you to recognize the power that is here. When we show up, and we're already beginning to vote across the country, be clear that when we show up, we should show up with all kinds of just strength, because we recognize that we do have the power. We're not just voting against these people who mean us no good. We're going to vote for the kind of future that we envision for ourselves, our children, and our grandchildren. And we have the power to do that. And then I'm going to end it where Siobhan started. And I don't know about you, but I know that as the Congresswoman said, we also have to do our work. But I'm going to tell you, I am never confused that we also have an almighty God who is at every moment watching, who controls the whole universe. And I'm telling you, in due time, when we do what we should, it's going to be all right. I tell you, the best is still yet to come. Let's show up. Let's vote like crazy. Bring everybody you know out to vote. I mean, really, and don't take it for granted. Ask your neighbors, ask your colleagues, ask whether or not they have a plan to vote, and let's go out there and vote and make our voices heard. And we're going to take this country in the direction that we believe it should go.
Love it. 30 seconds. Affirmation.
All right. Listen, I am going to pick up where Angela left off. But I also want to make sure that I circle back to the beginning. You talked about so many amazing ancestors of ours at the very beginning. You called them by name and you said that they are in this room. As you head to the polls, I need you to take your ancestors with you. Because let me tell you something. They are looking down, and we know that so many of them fought, bled, and died. And not only take your ancestors, take the next generations.
That's right.
And make sure that they understand the importance of what you are doing. I don't care if they can't vote. They need to be with you, and you need to explain it.
That's right.
Because in this country, they are trying to delete our history and pretend as if it never happened. And so it is going to be on us to make sure that we tell our own stories and we tell the true story of the struggle that we've always had in this country and about the opportunity that we have to make this country start to live up to the promise that it has given us so many years ago. It is time for us to move forward because we cannot and we will not go back. But if people don't understand where we've been, then they may be doomed to repeat that history, which is why they don't want us to have it. So make sure you take your ancestors and never, ever, ever relinquish your power. Right now, they want you to feel as if you're powerless. The government gonna do what the government gonna do. They gonna elect who they want to elect. All that kind of talk. Let me tell you something. They wouldn't be pushing voter suppression throughout this country.
That's right.
They wouldn't be then moving on to say, you know what, when we count your vote, well, maybe we don't want to count your vote. Now they've moved on to voter subversion. It is because they recognize your power. And the only people that can let that power go and let them win is you. So I just want y'all to remember that the power has always belonged to the people and nobody else. So it's power to the people, y'all.
All right, you heard it here. Let's hear it for this awesome panel. Angela Alsobrooks and Jasmine Crockett. NCNW is so grateful to have you. Thank you both for joining.